Welcome to the Chico Creates podcast, where we interview local artists, musicians, and makers from Chico, California. I'm your host, Kira Barsodi, and with me today is Maven Corvid. She is a multimedia or self-described multi-dimension artist who created her business, Putris Immaterata, Immaterata, thank you, around the idea of giving materials that would otherwise be lost to nature or landfill a second breath of life. She uses many different mediums, almost entirely reclaimed or upcycled materials, and is self-taught in museum-quality preservations of biological specimens, aka ethically sourced dead things, to share her unique view of reality. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Yeah. I'm very excited to be here. It's my first podcast.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm super excited to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself beyond the bio? I know you've got like a crazy story of how this all started.
I do. I have a wonderful villain origin story.
Yes.
But I would say in general, I'm just like, as a person, definitely just like an eccentric creative that is pretty much either at my house hanging out with my pets, which is I have a pet goat and a dog.
Your goat is so cute.
Yes, baked Elizabeth Pamela Beans. She comes to all the daytime art shows. She's cultured dairy. And then I have a little dog too that's like Godric, her buddy. Or I'm at Idea Fab Labs, which is where I have my studio, and it's kind of like my second home. Outside of that, I just kind of kick it old school. I don't know. Don't do anything super exciting besides art.
Your art's pretty exciting. So.
Thank you. I think so. It's exciting for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting for anyone, I think, who comes across it. We'll get into that. How long have you lived in Chico?
So I moved to Chico in 2012, originally for school, and then have pretty much just stayed for the community, I would say.
Yeah.
I got my degree in child development. Was like, nope. So then went the medical route, worked as a CNA for a while, ended up getting a job working in a clinic full time while finishing up my prerequisites to go to nursing school. I was kind of all set to do that, working as a training specialist for kind of a big affiliate of clinics, and ended up kind of having this life-changing medical event that threw me into the art world, and I have just not been fighting the tide since. So here we are.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. So then what's keeping you here is community you mentioned, and you're pretty well like ingrained in the Fab Labs world, it seems.
I definitely, I lovingly refer to it as my second home, or that I'm the ghost that haunts Fab Labs. But I found that place when I really had I don't want to say no community, because I've always had this amazing network of family and friends that have supported me kind of through this whole thing. But up until, up until Fab Labs, my entire community network of friends and family was all based through my work in the clinic and different things that I was involved with at the time in terms of like social activism in the community. And ultimately became disabled overnight and was not, able to do any of these things. And, those people all are living these very different lives than what I was living at that time. And so I really, it's scary to think, kind of what would have happened if I didn't find Fab Labs when I did. They had shut things down for COVID as a makerspace, and then post-COVID kind of tried one more grand reopening of the member space. And basically the two people that joined was me and Lauren, who you also had on this podcast. And we, met at the little intro to Fab Labs 101, and it's a very different place now than it was when I first joined, and just in terms of the focus has kind of shifted, but I've just kind of continued to get involved in different ways there, and it's just an incredible kind of community of folks that have just helped me grow so much as a person and as an artist. Most definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Do you mind saying more about like what happened and how that
totally
spurred you into this new avenue?
Yeah, 100%. So basically, like I said, I was like working in a clinic full time, sometimes up to 60 hours a week because I was training folks, so I would travel. And so that involved a lot of driving and not a lot of sleep. And so basically I had This was during COVID, so things working the medical field during COVID in
Yeah.
general was a very, collectively traumatizing experience.
Yeah.
And basically, our mission was just trying to keep as many people as we could out of the ERs.
Yeah.
And so that included myself. So when I started kind of having these small episodes, you could say, like health episodes, basically, I would get this very kind of weird feeling like leading up to it, and then would kind of have like get very confused and disoriented and kind of lose my speech or have like a part of my body that would move without, me like controlling
Yeah.
it.
Uh-huh.
And, it was concerning, but like I said, it was just the kind of thing where it would happen once and then it didn't happen again for, probably almost a year. And then it happened again. And then it was like, whatever. So anyway,
Yeah.
I had gone into the emergency room a few times because it had happened at work. And so they sent me out, the doctors that I work with, just to get checked out. And they just kind of were like, oh, it's probably anxiety, like follow up with the primary care provider or something like that. So ultimately what ended up happening was I was driving down the freeway and had about 30 seconds of that feeling,
like
that weird
pre-feeling?
feeling.
Yeah.
So they call it an aura is the
okay.
medical term for it. And I'm actually very lucky that my seizures have auras because some people don't get any warning.
Yeah.
And so thank God I was able to, there was an off ramp right there. And so I literally just like swerved off real fast but my car in park, and luckily was able to do that before I kind of slipped into a generalized seizure, which lasted for about 10 minutes, which is very long for seizures. Basically, anything after 4 minutes is typically considered like a life-threatening emergency.
Yeah. And you're alone.
Brain death. Yeah. And so I was so lucky because my mom happened to be driving right behind me and saw me kind of swerve off like that.
Yeah.
And because we had gone to pick up my car, long story. Anyway. And so she kind of went to the next exit and circled back around.
Yeah.
And so she was able to call EMS and kind of get through the car. And then, had this crazy brain chemical, quote unquote, death thing. It's not as though I actually, I kind of refer to it as when I died, but it's not as though I was actually pronounced dead or anything like that. That's not kind of the point. But anyway, I essentially kind of opened my eyes back up to that like bump into the back of the ambulance. And I, after that, was admitted to a hospital in Reading for the next like week or so, and immediately was started on a very high dose of anticonvulsants. I've been seizure free since, knock on wood.
Yeah.
And, basically during that time where I was hospitalized, we found out that the underlying kind of, or I guess the umbrella for the reason that these seizures had started in the first place is a genetic disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's actually, it's quote unquote rare, but it's probably a lot more common than we think. And kind of as this whole thing is developed, I've met, so many people that it's like, oh my gosh, I have, a friend's friend that, struggles with this.
Yeah.
So basically the rundown of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, it just is a genetic disease and it changes the way that your body produces collagen. So collagen is an essential protein. It kind of makes up every structure in your body, you could say. And so people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome tend to have collagen that's degenerates more easily, it stretches out more easily, it's more easily damaged and less easily healed. And basically the majority of people with Ehlers-Danlos, their symptoms, you could say, or the clinical presentation of that syndrome is problems with skin, like they kind of will have odd scarring, or like delicate skin, easy bruising, things like that. Hyperelastic joints. I do have those things, but in addition, I have basically your cerebral cortex, which is, the cling wrapped up around your brain is made of collagen. And so due to the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I started to have deterioration in the portion of my cerebral cortex kind of on this left side, which allowed for electrical kind of activity to start abnormally. And so that's, obviously it's collagen isn't something that, I can take a supplement, like it's a helpful
Your body
thing.
Needs to produce it still.
Exactly. And so it's not like there's a cure or anything like that. Because I had the neurological involvement, I was that kind of, so like I said, Ehlers-Danlos is a very rare genetic disease in general. And then kind of beyond that, I am the first person outside of one confirmed case of the vascular subtype, which is not the subtype I have, that's ever had any kind of the clinical presentation that I have in terms of the neurological involvement. And so kind of as a side effect of that, like I said, I am seizure free, but I have what's called dysautonomia, meaning the dysfunction or discomfort of the autonomic nervous system. So autonomic nervous system controls everything that you're not aware of. So your breathing, your heart rate, things like that. So I kind of have to do a lot in terms of day-to-day management with medications, lifestyle, just, you know, generally paying attention to my body, because what kind of will happen is that if there's kind of like a wrench thrown into any of those things. So for example, it's really hot or something like that, because now my body can't really regulate its body temperature like a normal person. It starts shooting signals, you know, okay, this is an emergency situation. Your brain's not getting oxygen. We need to jack up your heart rate, you know, to almost 200, which could theoretically cause me to pass out. You know what I mean? So it's kind of this vicious, like, ongoing cycle. And so kind of over the last 3 years, managing, you know, learning how to manage that and trial and error has been huge. I'm incredibly lucky that, because, like I said, my presentation was so rare of a even more rare genetic disease that has not had a lot of research done. My case was pretty much immediately picked up by Stanford University.
Great.
And I was able to, like, my care is still done through there. And they're absolutely incredible. I have the absolute dream team roster of, like, the best of the best, like, doctors in the world. And I'm just infinitely grateful because, you know, they have gone so far above and beyond to give me a quality of life. Because, you know, when I first was, quote unquote, got sick and all this kind of started, you know, my functioning was very different. Part of that was medication side effects. Part of that was, you know, just recovering from the seizure and everything that had happened. But I, you know, very much credit them with me being able to kind of function visually to the rest of the world as a quote unquote non-disabled person. You know, even though I still am, you know, obviously this is going to be a lifetime thing. But anyway, where I am now is a million times better than where I was. And it's the kind of thing, it's dynamic. So it's going to continue to come in waves throughout my life. But I'm just very grateful for the good times. And it's been pretty good for a while now. So
that's great.
That's
for like as bad as it is / could have been, you've kind of had the best outcomes. It seems like.
Really, you know, people have asked me, like, oh yeah, like, you know, like, aren't you mad about that? Or because there was some issues with some medical negligence that probably, like, I could have probably avoided that very large seizure, you know, but I think that everything that happens in life happens truly for a reason, even if we don't understand it and even if we'll never understand it. And I think that I wouldn't be the person I am today if none of that had happened. And, you know, there's this quote, Stephen Colbert talks about how if you're truly grateful for life, then what punishments from God are not truly gifts. And it's this kind of idea of that if you're truly grateful for the fact that you exist, you have to be grateful for even the, like, grossest, most, like, terrible things that have ever happened to you. And I think that when I first started doing art, it was something basically that started because after I got out of the hospital, I, you know, could barely function. I felt like a child. I could, you know, I wasn't even allowed to take a shower without, like, telling somebody.
Constant supervision.
Exactly. They took my license away. I couldn't go to work. You know, I could barely even, like, walk around my house. I was in a wheelchair. You know, just, it sucked. And so I was just honestly really mad at the universe and feeling really, like, sad sack sorry for myself. And the best way I can describe it is just sitting there rotting. So I had created kind of my first two pieces that started this whole thing are the two, I call them beasts of a feather. And they're pretty stinking big. I think you've seen them before.
Have they been at the art center?
Yeah,
Yes,
they're
yeah.
a lot of people kind of identify them. They're on my
Yep.
business cards and stuff like
Yep.
that. And so kind of the concept between them is that, and I didn't quite, a lot of my art, I feel like I don't figure out the full meaning of it until it's totally finished. And
Yeah,
then I'm like,
and, like, much
okay.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, that's where I was going
Same
with
here.
that. I'm like, oh, past Maddie. You sneaky little devil, you. But anyway, and so I had kind of like started, I had these 2 canvases that I had just had laying around forever, kind of as like scrappy canvases. And I had never thought about being an artist or doing art or anything like that. But I just kind of, I was watching a bunch of YouTube videos and like boring stuff. And I started like seeing like ideas, and I was like, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so I basically made these 2 big canvases, and they have these kind of beasts on them, and the beasts have like they share, each one has a wing from the same turkey, and each one has a horn from the same goat. And the rest of the creatures, though, are kind of Frankensteined from, all sorts of different ethically sourced bones that I get, which I can get more into that.
Would love to.
And then I kind of like hand painted them to, be consistent. So it all kind
Yeah.
of looks like one creature.
Yeah.
And one of them has an arm with a like little beaver hand thing that's extending like a dried sunflower to the other one. And the other one doesn't have arms to accept the gift from the first beast.
Yeah.
And it's moving kind of in the background colors of the canvas. The first beast that's extending the arm with the flower is kind of moving from the dark into the light, and then the second beast is moving from the light into the dark, and
Yeah.
it's leaving this like gnarly trail of smashed up glass kind of behind it that trails over kind of like onto the second canvas. And so at the time it was just kind of my way of trying to like process all
Process,
these
yeah.
like feelings of grief and like anger with the universe, really.
Yeah.
But I had a friend, shout out Danny Blouse, that was like, okay, like, and bless their heart, they were like, these are so bizarre. You should really apply to the Bizarre Bazaar. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's ridiculous. That's like an actual art show. Like, I'm not an artist. Like, me. And anyway, I kind of completely forgot about it. And then it was probably like they sent me the link, I think,
Yeah.
to apply a few weeks later. I was like, just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had really only made those 2 canvases. I mean, I think I had maybe done a few other things while I was working on that. So one night I was honestly just really bored and probably had like a glass or 2
Yeah.
many of wine
Yeah.
kind of thing, and was like, yeah, fuck it, let's apply.
Yeah.
And so I did, and then honestly kind of totally forgot about it until I got an email a few weeks later saying you've been accepted to be one of the vendors at Chikoko's,
Yeah.
Bizarre Bazaar.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
What did
Guess
I
we're
do?
doing this.
Yeah. So I had to, I basically came up with the name Maven Corvid. It's a nod. Maven is like a name. My family's Irish, and that's like a well-known name on my dad's side of the family that I've always liked. And then Corvid is a reference to ravens, magpies, crows, that family of birds, the, kind of too smart for their own good, very self-aware. I've just always kind of had this affinity for them.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, business name. I ended up going with the most difficult thing to pronounce that I could have possibly chosen.
As
same with
evidenced by
spelling.
my intro.
It's not you, for the record. This is like even people that like have worked my shows before
Yes,
and stuff.
yeah, they still stumble over
it's
it.
because it's kind of a tongue twister, and
Yeah.
I spell it also like a total jerk. But anyway, Putris immoderata, as loosely translated from Latin, means decaying obsession. And so kind of the idea that, the beast just kind of happened to be the product of this, but I decided to kind of go with moving forward is that I'm only going to be, making things out of stuff that would otherwise be like discarded.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, that can mean, parts of animals that have been, processed for other reasons, and would otherwise, just they have no commercial value. So
Yeah.
it's not like they're going to be sold or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm very much an animal person, and I've gone out of my way to really educate myself on what it truly means to ethically source things, and really took the time to kind of form my own opinions, because ethics is inherently subjective.
Right.
For some people, any use of animal products is not considered ethical. I
Right.
disagree. I think it's unethical for child slaves in China to
Yeah.
stitch together your vegan leather bag and then for us to put it on a cargo container and ship it
Yeah.
back and forth, polluting our oceans for 6 months before sending it to you
Yeah.
in like 50 different layers of plastic that will sit in the landfill, for the next
Yep.
500 years. Same with your vegan leather, bag that's
Yeah.
plastic.
Yeah, right.
But meanwhile, like leather, fur, things like that, it can be used and refurbished over and over and over again. And then literally when it's finally time to retire it, you could throw it in a fire. You could, it will
Yeah,
go back
it's gonna go
to
back
the
into the
earth.
earth. Yeah.
So I kind of just decided that was the mode I wanted to take. And it was, I didn't really realize it at the time, but I feel like it was my way of justifying my own existence at that point, because I
Yeah,
just
sure.
felt like I had become nothing but a burden to society overnight. I had kind of dedicated my life to being a helper.
Right.
I worked in emergency medicine.
Yeah.
I was going to go to nursing school. I was going to work in a high-level trauma hospital. I had, all of these things laid out, and the universe basically was like,
No,
Nope.
you're a taker now.
we got a plan. We got a plan for you. And,
Yeah.
it's hard to be a fully, almost aggressively independent 27-year-old that
Yep.
all of a sudden, has to rely on their parents
Again.
like
Yeah.
my retired parents. And shout out Janet and Mark, if you know, like they're the real ones. But yeah, so it was, I think in my mind, it was like, okay, if I can take these things that are trash
Yeah.
and turn them into something that's worth something,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, even if it's just to me or it looks pretty, you know what I mean?
Give it new
Then,
life.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would help me in some way. And so I just kind of started crazy creating for a few weeks after I had gotten this acceptance letter to the Bazaar Bazaar. And honestly, I thought it was going to be just some crazy, like, one-off story of
Yeah.
like, this is the thing I did one time.
Yeah.
At that point, I had no, like, ideas of doing this,
Yeah.
any further kind of than that date, and had never kind of evaluated. I had yet to find Fab Labs, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
I had kind of hadn't done any of this stuff. And also I was incredibly nervous because it was, I hadn't.
It's a big event.
It's a big event,
To-
and
yeah.
I had still not even told, I would say, outside of the people that were incredibly close to me in my immediate vicinity, I had not told anybody about the circumstances of my situation, because I was under the impression that at any day, they
could
would
happen
be
again,
like,
or-
well, not even that it would happen again. I just had, for some reason, this strange sense of false hope that they would be like, oh, this whole thing has been a mistake. Whoops, like, here's a pill. Like,
Yeah.
back to your normal life. Now you go. And so I
Yeah.
was really like hesitant to kind of
Accept it.
Yeah, accept
Yeah.
it and show, the world. And at that point, it's a very vulnerable thing too, being 27 and having to use any kind of mobility aids.
Yeah.
Like I said, right now, I'm in a spot where I'm like
Getting
able
around
to,
fine, yeah.
mobility wise, I'm doing great. But at that point, I could really not walk further than 10 feet without like my heart
yeah.
rate getting very scary. And it was a really dangerous situation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was, in complete denial that, I needed these things. And so I just chose to isolate pretty much, and never really, I don't think I left my house for like a full 6 months.
Yeah.
And like didn't post on social media or anything like that. And so it was like a few weeks before the Bazaar Bazaar, and I realized, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to
Explain all
public
of this. Yeah.
in my wheelchair. Like, people are going to talk to me,
Yeah.
and they're going to like wonder. And I'm like, what about my friends and stuff that I've been kind of ghosting this like last
Right.
couple months? Like, I think I need to like, bite the bullet and kind of
Get ahead of it.
get, yeah. And so I kind of, not that this is matters, but for my own sanity, I kind of made like a little public service announcement kind of thing on my Facebook, and was just kind of like, I've been kind of hiding out for the last 6 months, but for those of you that don't know, this is kind of what's been going on. And anyway, everybody was very supportive, of course. But so then Bazaar Bazaar comes. I'm, insane imposter syndrome, because like you said, it's a big
the
event
in Chico.
Yeah, and this is like, my first art event ever, and I'm
Yeah.
like looking at the Facebook invite page, and it's like 14,000 people have responded interested, and you know, it's or 1,400.
Yeah.
But you know, jeez,
You know,
everybody is coming. You know, but like still, I was like, oh my god, like what did I get myself into? And anyway, the Shikoku people are just absolutely incredible and so kind and amazing. And you know, the Friday we're coming in and trying to set up. I've never even set up a table before, let alone a booth. Now it's like, you know, an exercise, and I'm in a wheelchair. So my poor retired dad, who, you know, his kids grow up, they go to school, he retires, buys a camper, has these big dreams of, you know, vacationing and camping all over the place, and instead gets recruited to be the Maven Corvid team. So basically his camper is moving all of my art around, and he's having to physically do everything. Yeah. So bless his heart. He's to this day been at every single event, and is awesome. Like the, you know, number one, you know, Corvid
crew member.
Yeah. Crew. Perfect. The Corvid crew. OG. And so anyway, they were just so sweet and helpful with like, you know, trying to set things up and all this stuff. And anyway, I ended up not even realizing until it was like the first day of the bazaar, that it actually was to the day 6 months since I had that seizure.
Wow. And
marked my first 6 months seizure free, which is kind of the first big milestone that you have, where it's like you can start to kind of finally take a breath, because at that point, if you haven't seized again, and that is a pretty good indication that the medications that you're on are working.
Yeah.
And it also was, you know, the 6 months to the day of my big seizure, the first time I had really gone out in public since I had gotten sick as this kind of new person that was showing vulnerability and was no longer necessarily a helper but needed help. The first time I ever showed my art to the world, which you've seen it. I mean, one of my many catchphrases is "not for everyone."
Yes.
And that's fine, by the way. I love that. You know, like I don't want everybody to like it. That's kind of the point.
Right.
But I think that, you know, kind of coming into this space, feeling like a complete imposter artistically, and like, you know, I have no idea what I'm doing. These people are like professionals. This is what their life is. And then also just the vulnerability of, you know, like, okay, this is things that I made, and this is me now.
Yeah.
And then another side effect that I didn't really anticipate necessarily ahead of time is that when you're a 27-year-old in a wheelchair, every single human feels the need to ask you why you're in a wheelchair, and you're going to get really, really used to reliving the most traumatic experience of your life, like 500 times a day.
Yeah.
And at first I did not want my story, like my medical stuff, to be involved with my art at all. Like, I didn't want those two things tied. It felt very personal to me. And it felt very like exploitative to try to kind of use that, quote unquote, you know, like felt like very like #disabled artists, like
right.
You know, it's like, if somebody likes my art, I want it to stand, like I want them to like it because they like it. But I kind of at the Bazaar realized through talking to all these people that people really connected kind of with the story and the kind of experience. And even if it wasn't, you know, they've experienced something similar, it added a lot of like context and meaning to the art for people that are not seeing the world from my exact perspective.
Right.
And so, you know, I would say honestly, like there is nothing like doing an art show and like I said, retelling the worst moment of your life in explicit detail to hundreds of strangers over and over again for 2 days, you know, that's like the best therapy that you can. Like they talk about exposure therapy, like get with it, dude. And then it's so funny because like people like, and now I have no problem at all talking about it, obviously. And but it's just so funny because at the time I was like, oh my God, like people really like they're like, so what does it feel like to die? You know? And it's like, okay, Susan, like let's 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, but let's really dive into it. And so it was just like this kind of interesting thing, but it just really kind of, in my mind, up until that point, I was just, like I had kind of said, sitting there rotting, feeling really bad for myself and waiting for somebody to come in with a magic pill or a solution that was going to change everything and let me go back to being my own boss, like controlling what I'm doing, you know, and like, normal life. And so I think kind of radically accepting the fact that I truly have no control over anything, and
Which is
none
true
of us
for
do.
everyone. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I can sit here and be mad about, you know, it's so unfair. I'm 27. I did everything right. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, like blah, 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 blah. But realistically, you know, if you think about how large the universe is, and then even how large this planet is, and even how many people are on this planet, and then how individually complicated and complex each of their individual lives are. And, you know, even just the grand expanse of time, the sheer fact that any of us are existing at the same time in the same realms, in the same place, and actually meet the people that we love and care about and get to experience life with these people that, like, you know, are our friends, our family, and, like, you know, provide positive, negative, whatever. Like, all of that is so absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, I could sit there and think about, you know, this is so unfair.
Yeah.
Like, some people get it easier. Some people get it worse. Like, that's just the way that life goes. And realistically, nobody cares about your problems. And I don't say that in a negative way. Like, I say it, this is a very comforting statement to me. And I've had to learn the hard way that it is not a very comforting statement to other people when they are in a moment of distress. But in my mind, the fact that nothing that we do matters, and everybody that you know and love, and yourself, and everybody that they know and love, and we'll all be dead someday, and none of this will exist. That is like the most comforting thing in my mind, because it's like, no matter how much I mess up, or no matter how low life gets, like, there's nowhere to go but, like, somewhere else. Like, you may as well check it out. And so I think just kind of learning to, like, be like, yeah, okay, I don't see the grand scheme for this plan, but I'm just gonna, like,
enjoy
it.
I'm here.
Yeah. And then
totally, it gives you permission.
Exactly.
Yeah. I you know, not to get into my whole backstory, but
origin story
from like my spiritual story, I guess you could say. I was raised evangelical Christian. I've since deconstructed, and I have found so much comfort in that nihilism, where, you know, a lot
nihilism.
of where a lot
Not
of
passive,
exactly
active.
Yeah. You don't have to let things happen to you. You get to make your own meaning, and there's so much power in that. And I've come across people in my life who just can't comprehend, and I'm like, I don't know how to explain how freeing it is.
They're like, that's such a pessimistic outlook, and I'm like, it's not.
Though.
I'm not saying that you have no control over the things that happen to you and you're a victim to your circumstance. What I'm saying is that you get to choose the reality that you're perceiving. And realistically, who's to say, like, this is going to sound a little like multidimensional, but, like, realistically, like, who's to say what's real and what's not real? What's reality to somebody is not my reality, so I don't know what they're experiencing. And, you know, everybody has these different versions, and so it's just kind of like, we're all doing the best that we can with what we got at any given time. And just that, like, active approach to, you know,
that you get
I'm
to make your own
manifesting
meaning
what I want in my life, and I'm allowing things into my life that I want, and I'm removing the things I don't want in my life.
And you do have a lot of control over all that.
That's all the control.
Exactly.
You know?
That's
for me.
exactly.
Giving up the control and thinking that, you know, there's some, not to get all religious, but, like, some being or entity or something that's, like, controlling me. I don't like that. You know. I'm the puppeteer here. Of my meat suit.
Exactly. Oh man, that went way deeper than.
Sorry. I feel like that was a tangent. I was like, oh yeah, art.
I love it. I'm into it.
Cool.
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about the art itself.
Cool.
Yeah, you brought in a couple of pieces.
I did, yeah. So, like I said, I'm in the process of moving right now, and I didn't have time to actually swing by my studio. Plus, I would say 99% of the things that I end up making are absolutely gigantic because I'm
cumbersome,
and covered in. They're like weapons, like covered in broken glass and horns and antlers and things that are just ready to hurt you. So speaking of, I stabbed myself very bad the other day trying to move one of my own art pieces. But so I work a lot. I'll pull out this one to show you.
Awesome.
I work a lot with epoxy, and I would say, like, my biggest I said before I have a lot of catchphrases, but my biggest, like, catchphrase would probably be like, fuck around and find out. Like,
yeah.
in all things in life, it kind of goes with that active nihilism where it's like, who knows until it's after. But
exactly.
With art in particular, everything I do is 100% experimental. I've never taken a formal art class that I know of outside of just like maybe like a high school elective type stuff, you know? And I tend to be, just because of the way that my brain works, pretty much entirely self-taught. Like, I'm not the instruction manual type of person, if that makes sense. It's like, I will do something a million times in a million different ways until I figure out the way that it works for me, kind of thing. And so epoxy has been one of those journeys for sure. It is by far kind of my favorite. We have such a love-hate relationship, me and epoxy. It allows me to create anything that I can possibly imagine in this, world, and brings all of these crazy ideas to life. And none of the things that I make really would be possible without epoxy. But it is the grossest, messiest, most carcinogenic, moody, expensive, fucking just frustrating thing to work with in the entire world. I cannot tell you how many, like, oh man, like, that's trash. Like,
that's
even more
literally
trash.
Yeah.
Now it's like unusable trash. But it's, a lot of trial and error. And then it's just the kind of thing where it's like, I use like marine grade epoxy, and so it's like takes 72 hours to do a full cure. And if anything kind of happens during that time in terms of like temperature fluctuation, like oxygen, there's so many variables that can go wrong. And, if it doesn't set up, it never will. And that's, ruined.
Sounds like your body.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why I do it. It's just like, an intentional challenge. Because it's trying to mess with it. But I would say I feel as though we are friends now. And we have good stuff. But anyway, so this is kind of an example of like one of the epoxy type things that I've been doing. So I have been doing silicone molds of like body parts. This one is a mannequin face.
Oh, cool.
And then I'll cast it into epoxy. So I have one that's actually lesson to learn. Don't ever try to silicone mold both of your hands at the same time when you're home alone. Because it will start setting up and you will panic so hard when you realize that
your hands are trapped.
Both of your hands, and you'll get out of it. Okay, you may, but it's going to be embarrassing and you're going to ruin it. Like, and waste a lot of silicone and feel really dumb. So just a heads up. But anyway, and so then I'll make silicone. So I did one where it's like a face and then kind of like a female upper torso, and it's kind of the golden lady in the mirror. And then I've done ones with like where it's kind of like a 3-dimensional hand that I casted, and then I like incorporated like UV reactive mica powders and alcohol inks into the epoxy, and so the hand kind of reaches out from this, like, it's a upcycled window frame that I took from this like old like abandoned house basically, and then I like took the little door keyhole portion off of an old door and added that, and kind of the idea is that it looks like this window frame that you would kind of open. It's like a portal to the Putris is what I call it. And in the little, if you look through the keyhole, there's like a mirror that looks back and it's your own eye, and then if you look in the little peek hole to like see, like you would to see out. It's actually one of the taxidermy eyes that I make that's like looking back at you. And then it kind of has black lights built into it and an epoxy pour and glass and stuff. And then this like ghostly hand is like reaching out from the swirl. And so, I would say that's kind of the deal on epoxy.
That's awesome.
And then, thank you. And then I do a lot of stuff with like preservation. So like I said, everything's like ethically sourced, but I have kind of come up with methods to like preserve different things in different ways. Particularly, I focus on not using harsh chemicals and stuff like that, and using quote unquote like natural methods, because mostly I don't have a great reason, but mostly just because I have dogs and it has happened that, you know,
and
they
a
get
goat,
chew
which is
toy,
going to eat everything.
and it's just kind of like, you know, it's no huge deal. At one point, my dog Godric actually started contributing to rent because he chewed up a raccoon hand perfectly into a middle finger. And so it was like chef's kiss perfection. I like built it this like spooky little graveyard, you know, to go in. And it was just this like little tiny raccoon hand flipping you the bird. But anyway, he hasn't done anything that intentional since. But so in that case, it's like, you know, I don't have to worry about, God forbid, they get into something. Not that that's a huge issue, but still. And so I do, like, for example, I use like rabbit fur and I do face pelts. I have an example I'll show you in a second. And so those, I connected with this lady and her family that own a zero waste, they live on a homestead in Michigan and their focus is kind of zero waste. So they raise meat rabbits for them and their family. Everything that they don't eat goes to their raw fed dogs. What's left is basically rabbit fur that is considered to have no value. So the reason for that, people often get up in arms about fur, and if you don't know, now you know. Basically, factory farmed fur, I completely agree. That's totally not ethical. And the reason for that is rabbits that are processed for their fur, so factory farmed fur, their meat is considered unusable, not food grade. And so it's complete waste. Same thing goes for rabbits that are raised for food consumption.
Then their fur is considered.
Their fur is, not commercially sellable or usable, and it has to do with the processing and honestly just stupid laws. But basically, she will, you know, go ahead and overnight me a package of, you know, some goodies, and I will go through kind of the painstakingly long process of processing either them, turning them into like a pelt, like fur, like you would picture normal, you know, and I can make like purses, like little outfitty things, like whatever. Or I will do like I'll show you, this is an example of a face pelt. So basically what I do is
I've seen these. These are awesome.
For those of you that can't see, it is basically looks like a rabbit. What I end up doing though is in these cases, normally with fur and leather, you go through a process of like breaking it because you want it to be flexible. With these, I don't want them to be. I want them to be able to hold their shape for their whole life. So they end up all having kind of little facial expressions and personalities. So how I do that is I kind of go through a longer process of drying them kind of over time where they end up being completely rigid. And as far as I know and my research and stuff online, I'm the first person that's doing it this way. If anybody else is doing it this way, though, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to take. I just it was a kind of a long time trying to figure out how to do it. And so basically, I create kind of a mold, and then it takes usually a few months of kind of drying and shaping them, and then they come off of the head mold. And so this is just, it's almost like a mask. So it's completely empty inside of it. There's nothing in there. But like if it'll hold its shape basically for a lifetime. And so then, whereas a
and
fur
it's got some nice little jackalope antlers.
Exactly. It's got some nice little jackalope antlers. And then I make my own taxidermy eyes for my things. So the reason for that is traditional taxidermy, in my opinion, the eyes always suck because they're super flat. And like they just, that's the part that for me, every single time that I see taxidermy, like traditional, even when it's really well done, it's the eyes where I'm like, that's the part that I can tell. That's where I know. And so I kind of decided to go the method of, I'm not going to try to make it look real. I'm going to go fantasy with it, but I want them more real. So I model my taxidermy eyes after human eyes. And so they kind of do this very sinister thing. People tell me that they follow them, things like that, just because human eyes have a lot more depth to them. And so it's a lot more, I use hyper realistic human eyes, you could say. And then oftentimes I'll kind of play with, you know, like the natural color range that we would expect for eyes. Like, for example, this guy his eyes are like, it's like an orange to yellow kind of vibe, but it looks very much like a normal human you know, iris. And so anyway, just kind of playing with the like hyper realism aspect of, you know, little parts that I can tweak.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. And
Yeah.
then the other one I brought is this gal.
Ah, yes, the
So
dolls.
I do the dolls. They are probably I never expected them to be the thing that people have the strongest reaction to, but they really seem to, people either love them
Or hate
they
them, yeah.
absolutely hate them. And I get it, you know, not for everybody. But basically, my mom was a doll collector growing up and had a massive collection of Madame Alexander's and other, you know, very nice porcelain dolls that were, you know, gonna pay for my college education one day.
yeah.
And I was never allowed to touch because these are not toys.
Right.
And so unfortunately, the market for creepy dolls is not what we thought it would be at this time. And so anyway,
It's a different market
it's
for
a different
creepy
market.
dolls.
Yeah. And so basically I figured out that if I kind of pull their limbs off and glue dead things to them, I can sell them, and people will
Make
buy
them creepier.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I fully embrace that. So I call them the family, very lovingly.
Love that.
And they each have names and personalities. So for example, this is Mare Ether. And so it kind of comes from, she has a sister, and basically she is featuring, it's a, you know, obviously an old porcelain doll. I like do all the detailing and stuff on the dresses, and like I dyed
Love that.
this
That's
like
cool.
green. It was like a weird like light purpley color,
Yeah.
and then it gets kind of, you know, like it was from a different doll. That's why the sleeves are kind of short. And then she got like a new wig. She has
Bunny
little
ears.
bunny ears that I mummified, and then a small like antler rack. Some of them I'll use the face pelts on, where they'll have like full rabbit faces. Sometimes they have little like, you know, weird accessories and stuff. Her name Mare comes from the, you know, kind of mythology behind the word nightmare, which is the, you know, this kind of female succubus entity that would come into your home in the middle of the night and sit on your chest, and kind of a sleep paralysis demon kind of idea. And so then her last name is Ether, like ether. And so she's kind of supposed to be this like very sweet looking, innocent, but causing problems type of girl. But yeah, so it's just kind of like a dorky thing that I do,
love it.
where like I'm just like a namer. So they end up kind of all like having a little like personality, you could say. Like there was the first one I ever sold, Professor Amenadiel. He got his name because he actually had a music box in his body that played, I forget which one it was, but it was like one of the most popular like very religious hymns. And so he had a brown face pelt, bunny face, and wore like a very classy like red velvet kind of shirt with like a little leather vest thing, and he had a pocket watch and like a monocle and like, you know, curly hair. And his name was Professor Amenadiel because he, you know, he studies religion, you know, but he knows what's up. But anyway, so just like silly things like that. And then I also brought you just as a little fun
I get to take home,
I've been experimenting with air plants. So basically I take the one that I gave is like, it's kind of a silver color, but I have it's a silver like vertebrae from a cow. But I have ones that are like skulls and, you know, like different bits and bobs, like pelvises and stuff like that. But basically I was able to propagate a bunch of aloe from a friend's yard. They were like digging out, you know, like it had just taken over. And so I acquired just like way more aloe than any human could do anything with. And so I was like, okay, what do I do with all of this? And so I kind of started them hydroponically, and then have like slowly transitioned them to an air plant environment, you could say. So basically I take the bone, I like fully encapsulate, I get it completely preserved, and then I fully encapsulate it in epoxy essentially. So it's almost plastic at this point, you could say. And
it still preserves all the texture and everything.
But it's completely like water can't enter it in any way. And then the plants are kind of like get adjusted to not having any soil to root in or like, you know, access to water on a regular
Regularly.
basis.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of will fill up a bowl or a sink with water and plop it in there for 5-10 minutes when it starts to look thirsty, and then hang her back up and let her do her thing.
Amazing.
But yeah, so that was just kind of like a fun experiment over the last year.
Yeah. Amazing.
Thanks.
I love it all. I love the work. I love the story. It's all very, very
Thank
cool.
you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited I got to come and
Talk
share
about
with you
it all.
guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
Is there to send us off, is there a spot in town that you love to hang out, maybe other than the Fab Labs? Is there anywhere you go other than the Fab Labs and your first home?
Okay, so I'm going to be completely honest. Not really. But outside of just the quote unquote Fab Labs, every Thursday you can catch me at What is Art, which is a really fun open mic night event
Yes.
that we do Thursday nights there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a different vibe than the
Other open
Fab
nights.
Labs. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very much like open stage, open gallery. People get up, do spoken word poetry, whatever. I've recently started, I have a cajon, which is basically like when you're clapping your hands isn't enough. No, I'm just kidding. But I just wanted to be involved. But it's like a drum box thing.
Okay,
but anyway,
yeah.
and so it's like just a super fun time to like jam band with, friends and stuff like that. And I've kind of started a new musical project just
Awesome.
for funsies. So I'm calling that Miserabella. Because everyone's
it.
like, you sound so sad when you sing. But that's just, like a fun thing that I like to do, I would
Yeah.
say. So that's probably one of the main
Yeah.
social things. Otherwise, there's a couple, like I like to camp and not necessarily anywhere in Chico particularly
Right, yeah.
that I can think of for that. But,
But, yeah.
Aonami, sushi-wise.
Oh, yeah.
I can get down there.
Yep.
Mimosa flights not mimosa, Bloody Mary flights at Mom's. That dill pickle, that'd be popping.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I'm usually just kind of
Yeah. Either
creating,
home or Fab Labs.
smashing,
Yeah.
smashing things and gluing things back together.
Love it. Amazing. Where can people find you online?
You can find me at Instagram is definitely going to be the best way to connect with me. So if you go to @Putris, PUTRIS, Immaderata, IMMODERATA. That's kind of the best way to connect with me in terms of, messaging or whatever. I do have a website, putrisimmaderata.com. It's honestly, though, it's not updated.
Not as up to date as the Instagram.
I
yeah.
made it when I first applied to the Bazaar,
Yeah.
that first time, and I don't even know if I've updated it since then. So I'm kind of hesitant to plug that, but it'll make me update it. So this
Yeah,
is good.
good.
Motivation.
Good.
I need that. Deadlines.
Perfect. Well, awesome. You can find Chico Creates on Instagram at chico.creates, and we will see you around town.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Of course.
Bye, Chico.
Bye.